Hello, welcome back to this channel. My name is JC. In this channel, I talk about marketing, business, copywriting, and anything relating to growth of either personal growth or business growth. So today I'm going to talk about the law of duality. It is a marketing law. Let's get started. The law of duality. The law of duality says that in the long run, every market becomes a two-horse race. Young markets have many rungs on the ladder. They are highly fragmented. Gradually, as the market matures, players disappear and the market settles on exactly two primary players. Examples of this phenomenon are everywhere. For example, Coke and Pepsi, Canon and Nikon, Nike and Reebok, GM and Ford, McDonald's and Burger King. It often takes a long time for things to settle down, but in the end, markets usually give people what they want, which is two strong choices. Buyers don't like choosing between 10 or 20 players. It's too stressful. A big reason for this effect is that most people don't make their own buying decisions. People tend to buy what somebody else is buying. Pragmatists buy something only after they see the early adopters buying it. Conservatives buy it only after the pragmatists are buying it. Laggards buy it only when the peer pressure and ridicule is so severe that they look like absurd for not buying it. Market share begets market share, and the rich get richer. Even as the market gets very mature, it will continue to tolerate the presence of more than two players. However, the top two will have the lion's share of the market. All other players are essentially in niche segments. Once a market reaches this state, it will generally not allow number one and number two to move around. For example, the market will never allow the top two players to change positions. Burger King will never be number one. Furthermore, the market will not allow number one to get too far ahead. Just as markets hate having 10-horse race, they also hate having a one-horse race. When number one gets too far ahead of number two, the market will usually correct the problem. The software industry. At this point, I assume most of my readers are confused. After all, everything I said above makes virtually no sense at all when we look at the software industry. We don't have two strong choices. Most software market segments are a one-horse race. In many cases, Microsoft is so utterly dominant that there is no clear number two. Why do these markets not follow the law of duality? The popular notion today is that Microsoft is an illegal monopoly. I have generally tried to stay out of this debate, and I think I will continue to do so. Antitrust law has never made sense to me anyway. But whether or not Microsoft is a violator of government law, it is clearly a violator of natural laws of marketing. The current situation in software is not supposed to be possible. The market should have ensured the presence of a strong number two, but it has not. Even more strange here is the fact that software is still a rather young industry. At its tender age of perhaps 3 decades, we should expect to still have very high fragmentation, but we don't. I don't think antitrust law is the answer. It's quite clear that the federal government is no match for Microsoft, but the market itself still has a lot of power. The law of duality may yet show up. So that's the blog post by Eric Sink. And I have 3 thoughts to share in this video. So number one thought is, it's interesting that he mentioned people tend to buy what somebody else is buying. And I think this is an interesting marketing phenomenon. It's the herd mentality, because like most people, they don't have their own opinions. They look at other people and then they just follow. So this is actually pretty good for marketers. So if you are a businessman or a marketer, you can define your own rule and then have other people to easily follow. And you don't need to worry about many objections. So that's the good part. And then my second thought is that he mentioned the market will never allow the top 2 players to change positions. And he used the example like Burger King will never be number 1. This is something I really have doubts. I think, for example, Microsoft Excel has been very inferior to Lotus 1-2-3, and then after several years, at the continuous effort of Microsoft, Excel finally beat Lotus 1-2-3 and became the number 1 spreadsheet software. So I don't think the number 1 is unbeatable. As long as you keep trying for number 2 to keep trying, then there's a chance that number 2 can become number 1. So, and also there's another example. For example, Hotmail versus Gmail. It used to be Hotmail has the most amount of users, and then when Gmail came out, it has a very small amount of users. But then after several years, Gmail became the number 1 email application or email service on the in the world, and Hotmail, they didn't innovate, and then they just fell behind. So that's number 2 point I have, that I think the second place runner can still beat the first place runner as long as the second place runner doesn't give up. And then the number 3 point I have is that operating system. Eric Sink mentioned that the operating system is an anomaly, that only Microsoft is in that market and no other operating system available. But actually, I think there's a longer time frame that the second player finally showed up, which is Linux operating system. For example, these days, Chromebook, Apple Macintosh, and all those software, they're running on operating system software, they're running on Linux. And despite Windows being still the dominant player in the desktop arena, but Linux is gaining ground, and Linux is a serious contender to Microsoft Windows these days. So it does take time for the number 2 competitor to eventually emerge and then catch up with the number 1 player in this market, in the operating system market. So I think in this regard, this law of duality is correct, because even the operating system arena, then eventually there are 2 players. Number 1, desktop operating system is still Windows, but number 2 is Linux these days. So those are my 3 thoughts for after reading this article, and I think the law of duality is somewhat interesting, but not that useful, because I think even if you're number 3 or number 4 or whatever, if you keep trying, you can still beat the number 1. So this duality thing is not that encouraging or useful in this sense. So So this law of marketing, I don't think it's that important to remember. Anyway, so let's look at the other law of marketing in the future videos. And so I'll stop today, and I'll see you in the next video.